Greetings, everyone. This is episode 9, and we're going to continue with conflict, but now we're going to add suffering. These are two topics that I really do enjoy talking about because it shows us when we engage in conflict and we're suffering, there's something spiritual that happens within us, and it brings us closer to God, which we've talked about a little bit in our previous episodes. And then it also, we get the opportunity to show the power of the gospel. So before we continue, I wanted to just recap very quickly on the last 2 episodes of conflict that we did. So conflict, again, we talked about it's not a curse, but it's a divine invitation to transformation, reconciliation, and to display God's heart. We talked about Ezekiel 36:26. We also mentioned that the root of conflict is a human heart with desire that often go fulfilled. James 4:1-2 talks about that. Our role in conflict is not avoidance, but active participation in reconciliation, as we are agents of Christ. 2 Corinthians 5:18. 2 main responsibilities in conflict: we provide or usher in and facilitate reconciliation. We follow God's statutes, decrees, and laws. We mentioned that already. And then we also have this new heart, which allows us to do that God replaces the old heart that used to seek revenge, that has the propensity to go against him, with a new one that we'll find again in Ezekiel 36 that talks about seeking reconciliation, restoration. God laws also reveals sin. It reveals the guide and righteousness. It helps us to focus on those two things. So when we engage in conflict, those are two of the things that we should look to. It reveals sin, and it also guides us towards righteousness. And then we talked about how we should pray for a continuation for God to renew our hearts, which is kind of like a summary of the last one. Okay. So with that, what I want to now focus in on is a little bit more, like I said, is the conflict and suffering. So what I do think from reading the scriptures, in conflict, one thing we can choose to do when we're in conflict is to suffer. So that's one element that I'm going to touch on. The other element that I want to touch on is this idea of when people afflict you, mistreat you, and hurt you, and so on, they become enemies. So I'm going to touch on the enemies part and kind of talk about a little bit about how we should view this, okay? So it's a strong word, enemy, and sometimes you don't think of your spouse as your enemy or your child as your enemy, but this is basically how you treat them when you're in conflict, okay? So maybe you have someone that you may consider an enemy, somebody sometimes at work. Remember one time in corporate America, I had someone that was just out to get me. They had a meeting about me one time. It was kind of funny, to try to get me in trouble so I can get fired. So I could probably consider that person as an enemy. So, the idea, live a while, and at some point, someone will spitefully use you or hurt you, wound you in some way or, some fashion. So many times these are the people that when their name are mentioned, you feel like a cringe sometimes inside of you. If they walk into a room or something, you might say, I want to be around this person, right? And so that's happened in marriage before and other relationships, right? So enemy or not, we have those that we may be tempted to curse, right? Sometimes because they've been so bad to us, we want to curse them with our words, sometimes with our thoughts, right? Now, Jesus specifically says that we're supposed to handle these people, the enemies, with intentionality. And the way we do that, the way he instructed us to do that, is by praying for them. Pray blessing over them, to be specific, okay? So it might be painful just to think about this when you're going through a tough time with someone that's mistreating you. The last thing you want to do is pray, which is again revealing maybe the state of your heart, right? And then you talk about praying for your enemies, right? It may surprise you that God specifically is saying that we're supposed to exercise this muscle called praying for the people that has hurt us because it's good for us, right? So again, before we go into specifically into the suffering, I want to start off with the position that we might be holding this person in, and we really want to think about how we should treat this person, right? Treat them in our thoughts, in our words, and our actions. Okay. So let's look at specifically what Jesus says in Matthew 5, verse 43. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Why? That you may be sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For, why? If you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so? Therefore, you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect. Okay, I'm not going to touch on that word perfect right now because that's a whole different thing. But you see how Jesus has these strong words for us, right? This is Matthew 5, 43 to 47. Okay, so there's this position that he's wanting us to hold people who curse us, who makes our life difficult, who is irritating us, who is annoying us. And he's saying, here's how I want you to treat them in your heart, with your thoughts and your mind to start off with. And then here are the things that I want you to say, and he's telling us, bless those who curse you, right? Pray for those. I mean, when you pray for someone to God, you're not praying, you don't normally pray, hopefully you're not doing this, but you're not praying for God to give them a little bit of blessing or a little bit of miracle or a little bit of whatever, right? So if you're praying to God, you're asking for the whole kitchen sink and the house, that they would get everything that he has for them, not, you know, punishing them. Like, oh, like when you say something like, well, I'm gonna, I got something for you, right? No, that's not what you mean. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, go to God the Father, your Father, and pray for blessing, ridiculous outpouring of God's favor on their lives. I mean, think about that, right? I mean, do you think about when you've been in a conflict with your wife or your husband or your child or your friend, your coworker, that this is how you should handle the conflict within internally? You ask God to bless them with everything that He's got for them. I mean, it's just Jesus turned the world upside down now down. He's asking us to do the same. He's asking us to follow Him. So it's very important that we read these scriptures and we take our time to digest them. Okay. I mean, Jesus' love was enduring, and He's wanting us to love with endurance, right? His love never gave up, right? And we shouldn't. Our love should never give up. Okay, we gotta stay when things are hard, and hold on when others would walk away. We don't quit on people or promises. We rely on God's promises for us, right? Our love perseveres through disappointment, fatigue, adversity, right? We know that marriage, family, fatherhood, it requires a long commitment. Being a wife, it's a long-term commitment, right? So it's taking a while for us to sometimes execute on what Jesus is asking us to. But so he's like, I want you to just stay the course. We don't retreat when we're misunderstood. We lean in with faith, right? We are faithful children. This is what it means. We're faithful children of God. Okay, as a husband or a father, you know, your wife can rest knowing that your love is not fragile. It doesn't get removed and put back based on how well they're treating you, right? There's evidence of long suffering type of love that reflects steadfastness. Endurance proves that our love is real and rooted in something, which is the Holy Spirit, which is God, which is the gospel, right? Our love is protective. When we see our enemies, when people are mistreating us and we don't like what's going on, God is asking us to protect them. We protect people emotionally, spiritually, and even physically, right? As a man, you're called to guard your home from outside threats, and guess what? Internal conflict. I tell people all the time, as a man, you're the thermostat. You don't determine, you're not the one that moves the thermostat, but you are the thermostat. You're the one that's kind of like, here's the temperature in our home. This is where we need to be, right? This is where we want to be, right? But I'm not forcing everybody to get hot or cold. What I'm doing is I'm remaining warm when it's cold, right? And I'm cooling things down when it's hot. But I'm setting the temperature. I'm being consistent. You know, the electric company tells us that when you set your temperature, you shouldn't move the thermostat up and down because it causes the system to work harder to start and to stop, right? So they're like, set it at a certain temperature in the winter and the summertime, and then that way your system will kind of have a good cycle working. It's the same thing in a home as a man, right? Right? As a man, you watch over the heart of your wife. You're guarding it. You're not getting drawn into all the stuff that may be going on. You're guarding it, right? You speak truth when lies come in. Okay, you bring peace when chaos threatens, right? A lot of times you you cover the fear, the things that your wife might be worried about. And a husband, as a wife, for your husband, you're encouraging him when he feels defeated. You can know that if he's looking down on his shoelaces more often, right? So this is how you protect him, by the way, ladies. When you encourage him when you see him down, don't get on him when he's down. The world is kicking his teeth in sometimes. The money, the finances, the job, the boss, a lot of things are going on. And what you can do, you can protect him by encouraging him. And look, that's a form of protection. Okay? You're caring for his heart when it's down. Okay? And here's the thing. We have to remember that Jesus Christ is our standard. Let me just take a minute and just talk about that, right? Jesus Christ is our standard. Just two things that we should be meditating on every day. When it comes to us being in conflict, suffering, struggling through things, how am I being, my ultimate goal, number one, my ultimate goal, your ultimate goal, is to be more like Christ every day. Okay, we are disciples. We're not just labeled as Christians. We're disciples. Right? Ephesians 5:25 calls the husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church. Not unfamiliar verse, right? Gave himself up for her. Love is not shallow or situational, guys. It's sacrificial and consistent. Jesus' love wasn't based on worthiness, but it was based on a covenant. Okay? It's not about he's choosing whether he should love us or not in situations. He's just loving us, period. And it's not inconvenient or difficult. He's just like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do. I love you. That's what I do. part of who I am, right? So in conflict, you have to understand that love is not dictated by emotions, but by commitment, like I said. You're not waiting to feel something. There's a decision that you're making to demonstrate love, right? So Jesus's love led him to the cross, carried the cross, took the beatings and the whippings for us, right? So I wanted to just end with a important verse. I want to talk about this. So as it's related to conflict, it's extremely important that we kind of read the scripture slowly. I want the scriptures to speak more than I'm trying to speak here, but as far as my opinion goes. So Hebrews 10:34-39. This is one of the scriptures that really changed my heart and really helped me to see things in a different light when it comes to difficulty or struggles, when there's opposition, when there's resistance. Okay? So Hebrews 10:34-39. I'm going to read the NLT version. It says, "You suffered along with those in prison and joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property because you knew that you yourselves had better and lasting possessions. So do not throw away your confidence. It will be richly awarded. You need to persevere so that, why? So that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. For in just a little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay. But my righteousness is a quote, he's quoting, my righteous one will live by faith, and I will take no pleasure in the one who shrinks back. But we do not belong to those who shrink back and are destroyed, but to those who have faith and are saved." We don't shrink back. So the writer of Hebrews is talking about, just kind of using this. You've suffered. You've been in prison. You've been restricted. You've been tied down. But there's people taking your physical things. They may also say things, hurtful things, like I like to describe it as creating gaps, right? The things that you want, that you hold dear, people that love you, in a way, emotionally, they take things from you. They're not doing this on purpose, by the way. This is just sort of the human condition at times with brokenness and sin. And then the Hebrew, he goes and he says, why did you suffer in prison? Why did you endure and stay when people were creating gaps and spaces in your heart? The people that trusted you, the people that you trusted, sorry. Why did you stay? Why did you continue to suffer? He says, because you knew. What is that? Because you knew yourselves had better and lasting possessions. What is the better and lasting possessions? When you compare all the stuff that he mentions in verse 34, what is the better and lasting possessions? What is that? Who is that? Hint, hint, right? Jesus, the Holy Spirit, right? And then he says, verse 35 says, so do not throw away your confidence. You know that the things that were taken from you, the hurtful words that people made, gestures, all these things. What he's trying to tell us here, guys, telling me as well. Don't throw away your confidence. It says you're going to be richly rewarded. And again, this reward, I don't believe it's only years from now, when he comes back, I also believe that when we don't throw away our confidence and we suffer and we press through and persevere in conflict, we are rewarded in that moment. Compared to it when you see your child pressing through a hard time in their life, they're facing something difficult and they figured it out. You as a parent, you feel proud because they worked through it on their own and they persevered, right? Verse 36 says, you need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, remember, so we talk, hopefully, can't recall if we mentioned this already, but the will of God is unity. So when we're in conflict, what we're trying to do is reconcile, redeem, right? So it says, when you need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, which is unite with Him, unite with God, right? You'll receive what He has promised. This promise, I also believe that it's not just a future thing, but you actually get the promises in the moment when you persevere. This is a reward that God promises. You seek reconciliation, you seek unity, okay? And there is a promise that God has for you when you follow His laws, decrees, statutes, like we talked about that before. There's a promise that comes with following Him, following His ways. When He decrees something, He's like, this is how it's going to be, like we talked about. And then you follow the law. This is how you do it. This is how you structure. This is how you behave. There is a promise that God has. You won't receive the promise if you're operating outside of the order, right? We talked about that in the last episode as well. Okay? So again, everyone eventually faces people who hurt us, betray us, use us even, right? Okay? We talked about enemies. How do you treat them? And the most important thing is understanding the reward that comes from suffering. You do that through not treating the person like an enemy, but let's say they had that label and you're treating them like that in their thought and your words. What do you do now that they're there and they've been titled the enemy? You suffer well by following God's decree and God's law. Okay? And He's telling us, remember, love endures, love protects. Jesus is the standard. There's sacrifice involved. Okay? So when you're in conflict, what I want you to be thinking about is endurance. I want you to be thinking about now when this person now who seems to be the opposition, the person seems to be on the other team, the person is now your enemy. What does God say? How do you treat them? Okay? So I want to leave you with a couple of questions. Who in your life do you struggle to see as anything but an enemy? Okay? Here's another question. This week, now that you've listened to this and consider it, how can you start praying for them? And again, prayer is not just like give them some water, right? Prayer is like give them everything. Give them everything you got for them, right, God? Right? This is what you're asking for. And then here's another question. How does endurance in love help de-escalate conflict? What is the reward that's there for you when you endure? Right? Because it has to be practical. There's a reward when you endure. When you handle conflict according to how God wants you to handle conflict, there is a reward. Okay? So I want to leave you with a very, very important thing for you to consider. All the people that's been difficult, when you're in a conversation that's been difficult, I want you to think about how you're treating them in your mind. Now that, let's say, they've become an enemy, I want you to think about how do you suffer well through this? Again, we just laid out how Hebrews talks about suffering, which is directly linked to endurance, right? And then understanding, comparing. This is what I did in my life sometimes, is I compare the now to the truth, the now to the truth, the now to the truth. The now is that I'm feeling like this. The truth is that I have a possession greater than all the things, greater than even all the pain, greater than all the comforts and the desires that I want from this person, the way that I want to feel safe from this person, all that. The possession of Christ far outweighs that. So in a practical sense, in those moments when you have difficulty with a loved one, think about the possession that you have. Think about endurance. Think about suffering connected to endurance. Think about praying for them. And again, not just a little itty bitty prayer about giving them something small. Go to God and ask God to give them everything that He has for them. Grant everything that's on their heart. This, let me tell you, there's a time in my life when I, like I said, Hebrews 10:34 to 39 really changed my life. It really helped me to be freed, to think beyond the moment, to understand how suffering is related to conflict, and it really kind of tied it up in a nice bow for me to apply it practical enough and simple enough. So until next time, I look forward to doing the next episode, and if we're currently meeting, look forward to seeing you guys, and want to tell you I love you, and peace be on you this week. Bless you.